I'm Lee Feinswag, and this is Sports 225. And not just any Sports 225. This is the 25th year of the show. We started with Sports Monday, continued it into Sports 225, and now, a quarter century later, here we are. Sports 225 is sponsored by Breck. And now, me. Well, I've been wanting to do a remote show like this for a long time. And so tonight on Sports 225, not only will you see Cole Wright, and I'll get to him in a second, but later on in the show, Steve Berkowitz from USA Today, who covers the NCAA and financial implications of the NCAA. And let me tell you something. His work at USA Today is something, and with the issues this week with California saying that athletes could make money off of their likeness, you don't want to miss that part. But for those of you who don't remember, Cole Wright, who is now at the NFL Network and is riding his bicycle to work and stopping with the Pacific Ocean in the background, working for BLA a little more than 10 years ago, was a guy who came on the old Sports Monday. By the way, since we've become Sports 225, and I told my wife, I said, this guy won't be here long. But you were here 2 years and met your wife, who's from Baton Rouge. Yep. And I've always said, man, Cole, the things that he's done since you've left. So right now, NFL Network, tell me about that gig.
Well, it's a dream job, honestly. I mean, to be able to cover just one sport, as much as I always loved covering, every single sport, just to be able to go and know that you only have one thing to knock out every single day and you can be laser focused on it. And, just a bunch of people that we work with up there. I mean, we call it the NFL Network family. And I really honestly feel that's how it is. It has such a family kind of feel. You can walk into anyone's office. You can, strike up a conversation with pretty much anybody from top to bottom, whether it's Mike Mariano, the head of production, or, Mark Quinzel, and he's been in the business for, 40 years, 35 years. So just to be able to pick those guys' brains and be able to just tap into their knowledge, it's pretty fun, especially just being around, all the Hall of Famers, in addition to that, TDs walking the hallways, Kurt Warner, Deion Sanders, Michael Irvin. So, there's never a dull moment for sure.
Well, when I got the idea for this, because we hadn't connected in so long, was I saw you doing the Sunday night show and I was on an airplane and I must have been Southwest, I think, and it had the NFL Network. And I said, oh my gosh, there's my man, Cole. And I said, I had forgotten that you had gone to the NFL Network because you've done so many things since then. Now, without giving like the entire resume, but here, when you were here in Baton Rouge, you were here during a great time for athletics stuff you got to cover. But then,
absolutely,
the next time I saw you, I was watching. I was up in Boston, and you were doing a Bruins game. I mean, you went to ESPN, you went to Fox. It must be just fascinating what the last 10 years have been like for you.
It's been fun. It's been, there's been a lot of different moves, but I think when you get into this business, I think you kind of know that that's what you're going to do until you find that final destination. And, that's how I feel about NFL. And, but, I went, like you said, I went from Baton Rouge, I went to Boston, I worked at Nesson. That was the, the Bruins and the Red Sox network. And then from there, I went to ESPN and then Fox Sports 1. And now here at NFL Network. And, I also do stuff for the Dodgers. And I was just riding my bike in here, like we were talking about. And I just rode past George first base coach. They're getting running. So I think they're going to be pretty good against the Nationals, despite what momentum the Nationals are riding right about now. Because, being inside of that clubhouse, I think I did 13 games this year. I think that I was probably at the stadium for about 7. Last year I did about 25 games, and to be around that ball club and to see what they bring to the table each and every single day. I think they have someone on the bench at every single moment that can take you deep, and that's the difference in years past. And I asked Dave Roberts the day before the All-Star break. I said, "What's the difference between this team and the teams from the last 2 years?" And he said, straight point blank, that this team is going to win the World Series. So hopefully that holds true, because if so, last time I looked, I think I get a ring.
That's a bit much. But if you've never been to a game at Dodger Stadium and watched the Dodgers, it's a truly wonderful experience. Living in LA, you've got the right idea, riding your bike. I got to go out there next week. As a matter of fact, I'll be out there for some volleyball business. And nice. I've got to make some drive. I have to go from LAX to San Juan Capistrano, then back up to El Segundo the next day. So that'll be half a day of my life.
I just rode right through El Segundo. I just rode right through there.
When you were here in Baton Rouge, correct me if I'm wrong, 2006 to 2008? Yeah, you blinked out for a little bit. You still there?
Yeah, my wife was calling me, but yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
yeah. Okay. I got the same thing. I had hit, So 2006 to 8, I think it was, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
We covered a lot of good national championship team, College World Series squad. The girls go into the Final Four. The Hornets, we were in the Western Conference semis. The Saints went to the NFC. You're saying, like, just so many things that just seem to line up at the perfect time.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this will be, part of doing the adventure of this, of doing the Skype like this is, on mine, what I do is I've got a thing called Do Not Disturb. Remember that for next time.
Good call.
But you met your wife and you were here, because I want to talk about the NFL. I got, one more segment I got you held to here. But before we finish this one, you met your wife here. So, this is partially home still.
Absolutely. No, we get down there. She gets down there a lot more than I do. And, I haven't been to a game since Georgia, LSU, when Matt Stafford was still the quarterback. So Kent Lowe said whenever I come back, he said he's got a seat for me, but I haven't been able to make it down because obviously, college football season is, National Football League season. So, it's tough to get out of town at that time of year. So I'm trying still. I'm trying.
Your wife's name is Reagan, right?
Absolutely.
And you guys have a daughter, Paisley?
Yes, that's correct.
And, man, because I'm thinking the last time I knew you weren't married, didn't have kids. I mean, come on,
I know. Time flies, doesn't it?
It's great. All right, look, we'll take this break on Sports 225. We're visiting with Cole Wright from the NFL Network. Now I've clued you all in as to why we would visit with him. And we get back, we got some good NFL stuff to talk about. So hold that thought.
Imagine winning 5 times the cash from the lottery.
Imagine winning 5 times of anything. Robot dance fight?
Robot dance fight.
Multiply whatever. The new multiplier games from the lottery. Multiply your fun.
Break out of the routine.
Due to high industry demand, enroll to get a degree from ITI in air conditioning, refrigeration, and electrical technology. This accelerated program will teach the concepts and practices of the HVAC industry, the fundamentals of heat transfer, refrigerants, safe work practices, electricity, and the governing regulations of these systems. You'll also learn AC load calculations and application, troubleshooting of refrigeration and AC systems, and receive HVAC certification exams. So start your new adventure by enrolling today. ITI Technical College for a better life.
All right, we're back on Sports 225, and we're Skyping it later on in the show. Steve Berkowitz from USA Today talking about the NCAA and letting athletes make money off themselves. But right now, another segment with Cole Wright of the NFL Network, formerly of Baton Rouge. And, the last time you were here, it was Sports Monday. And, we had the big Lazy Boy chairs.
The Lazy Boys, the chairs.
We went all virtual. It's all green screen. And, people who normally watch the show, they don't know that we're just sitting in these little chairs. We couldn't use the Lazy Boys because when people would rock, they would get lost in the virtual. You know how that goes. And so this is the 25th year of Sports Monday / Sports 225, which explains why. See, people don't see it because he's wearing his hat. He had no hair when he was here because he shaved his head. Mine is
still none.
Yeah, there you go. But you're looking good.
Thank you, bro.
So we set up in the last segment, in case you're just joining us, about how Cole worked here from 2006 to 2008, and it took an amazing path to get where he is with the NFL Network. And of course, here people are, very Saints-centric. They're surprisingly good this year under adverse circumstances. So I'm sure you pay close attention to them.
Yeah. The one thing I never really had any doubt in Teddy Bridgewater. I've been a big fan of Teddy Bridgewater forever, and there's a reason why they made him the highest paid backup in the National Football League, and there's also a reason Why? He said, Dolphins? Nah, I'm good. I don't want to be the Dolphins starter. I think I'll just be the Saints backup. And I don't think it's because he thought that there was, anything that was going to happen with Drew Brees, but I think he just knew that that would be a way better situation, as that's what it's proved. Because, I mean, the situation he's in right now, if he can just keep on winning games, I mean, this may be a springboard. I mean, I'd have to look back at his contract and all the language there, but this could be a springboard for him to get a starting quarterback gig again. And I think Teddy Bridgewater is worthy of that because we see a lot of subpar quarterback play in the National Football League, each and every single Sunday. So, for Teddy Bridgewater to go out there and be able to lead the Saints to wins, especially over a team like the Cowboys. I mean, a squad that, I mean, they're playing some solid football right now. And, whether or not people think Dak Prescott is top flight, I mean, he's proved it the first few games. And I think the Saints just showed that they're a solid team as well. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with all season long.
Well, you brought up an interesting point about the quarterback situation. Well, one thing that made me think about it was, you remember when Nick Saban was at the Dolphins and he passed on Drew Brees and Teddy Bridgewater passed on the Dolphins. But, the logic, though, is that even though Drew Brees' injury was a fluke thing where he followed through and hit his hand and hurt his thumb, the odds of an NFL quarterback making it through the entire season without being injured and having to miss time. I mean, have you ever seen a virtual bloodbath of quarterbacks like this year? This is incredible.
I mean, especially with the quarterbacks. I mean, to see all these guys getting hurt so early on, I mean, it's unfortunate. But, as unfortunate as it is for those guys, it's been, almost a blessing in disguise for some of the other cats, like Teddy Bridgewater, like Gardner Minshew, just for those guys to be able to step up and elevate their game and to be able to fit, not just fill shoes, but live up to expectations. And, I mean, I love what Nick Foles brings to the table, but I mean, if you're Jacksonville, you have to take a long, hard look at that quarterback situation. You have to look at the money that's going to be owed to Nick Foles and see if what would be best for the franchise. Would it be best to keep Nick Foles around and keep paying him, or to keep Gardner Minshew on that rookie deal and to keep continuing to get what you've gotten out of him so far? And what have we seen? I mean, a small sample size. I mean, he's thrown 2 or more touchdowns in every single game. So I think, building forward, that's something that you really have to hang your hat on. And you have to look yourself in the mirror and say, with all these injuries, we can make the most out of our payroll. And that's what a lot of teams have to do. Yeah.
In case you're just joining us, Cole Wright of the NFL Network, riding his bike to work with the Pacific Ocean in the background, and he's chilling. So let's finish up with the NFL Network, because it looks like you guys have such a good time. And just tell people some of the people you get to hang out with and some of the interactions. For one, were you ever starstruck when you first started there?
I mean, no, because, having worked in Boston, I used to sit in the green room and watch Red Sox games with Dennis Eckersley and Jim Rice. And those are guys, I grew up watching. I say that maybe back then it was kind of like, oh, wow. Because I remember when I first sat in there, I didn't say a word to those guys. I just sat there and was just a fly on the wall. Because
let me interrupt, too, and tell people that Cole was a national championship junior college baseball player, pretty good player who, you've in the Midwest. You're from Chicago area.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
but anyway, so anyway, you were with the Red Sox and those guys, and then
Yeah, and sitting in a green room with Jim Rice. I remember my dad would always tell me, and he wasn't a baseball guy, and still, I mean, he loves baseball now, but he wasn't a baseball guy growing up. But he always told me stories about Jim Rice, and he said, if you want to be a good hitter, you have to have strong hands and wrists like Jim Rice. So I'm sitting in the green room with Jim Rice, and my pops told me a story. So I asked Jim. I said, hey Jim, is it true that you broke a bat on a check swing? And then he looked at me and said, shh, I broke 2. So just to be able to sit there and I used to love the Oakland A's, Ricky Henderson, Jose Canseco, Mark McGwire, Carney Lansford, Walt Weiss, obviously Dennis Eckersley, Dave Stewart. And so to be able to sit there with Dennis Eckersley and watch games and have him every once in a while ask my opinion. It's like, hey, what do you think about that? What would you throw here? What would you throw there? And it's just like, I mean, I don't know, I guess. And I sat in a room with Pete Rose before, and he sat and watched the guy foul a ball off his hands, and he looked at me and my buddy who played in the Frontier League together. He said, how do you do that? Well, I played a whole season and didn't foul a ball out and used the bat the whole season, the same bat. So I think it's that'll get you a little starstruck.
Well, in the minute we have left, some of your favorite characters from working with at the NFL Network.
Maurice Jones-Drew. I mean, he's a fool. Like every once in a while, I'll see him on the bike path and we'll just ride all the way into work. And Terrell Davis, world's luckiest golfer. I mean, Hall of Famer on the field, Hall of Fame guy. I mean, there's so many. Mike Robinson, James Jones. Reggie Wayne. There's just almost too many to name. They're all Class X.
All right, who wins the Super Bowl?
I want to say the Saints, but it's tough to go against the Patriots, and it's real tough. I have to say the Patriots have to get by Kansas City, because Kansas City, they're going to be a force, and Patrick Mahomes, he's only getting better, man.
Cole Wright of the NFL Network, formerly of a couple of years in Baton Rouge, one of my favorite guys when you're here. I'm so excited that you're doing so well. Watch him on the NFL Network and follow him on Twitter at
Cole Wright NFL.
Cole Wright NFL. You are the man. Thanks for taking the time, and what a most unusual interview and a most unusual show. When I get back, I'll be with Steve Berkowitz from USA Today talking NCAA money. Cole Wright, thanks. I'm Lee Feinswag. This is Sports 225.
Anytime, Lee.
The usual.
With 11 locations, we have it all at allstarautomotive.com.
Most people think the Y is a gym, but to me, it's so much more. It was where I made my first friends. And I got my first A, with help from the after-school enrichment program. They taught me discipline and gave me confidence, and they do the same thing for millions of kids every day. The Y helped me achieve my goals and be so much more. You can help by giving to the Y.
Best tailgate, brisket.
No, real football y pollo asado.
Hoops and wings. Dude, subs.
Hot dogs.
Chili dog.
No, Dodger dog.
It's gotta be crawfish.
Now you're talking. Burgers.
7-layer dip. Ribs. No contest.
Hummus.
What?
You need a hot grill.
And an ice-cold Coke.
Of course.
Football and Coke. Come on.
It's got to be Coke.
Game day.
Race day.
Calls for Coke. You know it.
Grab yourself a Coke.
It's Tailgate 101.
All right, we're back on Sports 225, and as promised, we're going to talk about the NCAA and paying athletes or letting athletes pay themselves with Steve Berkowitz from USA Today. Not only my good friend, but a guy who's on top of the money scene when it comes to college athletics. So, Steve, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed the bill on Monday. State bill, I think it was 206, and it has all sorts of names. But is it really Armageddon in college athletics as we know it?
That remains to be seen. I mean, whether or not it sort of depends on whether or not California ends up sort of going it alone, whether other states get involved, or whether or not this whole thing goes to court. Whether and how the NCAA deals with what any of those outcomes look like too would sort of have an impact on what this ultimately ends up being. Don't forget that we're 3 years away from the law's effective date, which leaves a lot of time for things to be worked out, and whether or not the NCAA wants to change its rules in behind this panel of folks who've been looking at the name, image, and likeness issue and are supposed to report to the Board of Governors at the end of October. We'll see what that looks like. So there are just a lot of variables. It's a little bit early to tell what the ultimate outcome of this is or might be for the association.
Well, I think all of the things that you mentioned will occur. Other states will jump in. There will be lawsuits, and it's going to be a complicated tale. By the way, Steve's at the USA Today offices in Virginia. Boy, I remember in the old days when there was typewriters and people actually had little bottles of bourbon probably in their drawers and they smoked cigars. Now it's like you're in this antiseptic, quiet place. You never could have done an interview like this 100 years ago in a newsroom.
No question. It's like an insurance office now.
So the Pac-12, for example, came out with a statement saying that they were against it. And I think that was, of course, to be in lockstep with the NCAA. Does the NCAA just envision financial free agency and a ruination of its organization with this?
I think what the NCAA fears more than anything is losing the ability to make its own rules. I mean, the association, and again, as always, keep in mind, the association isn't a group of guys in Indianapolis. The association is the schools and the conferences collectively. And I think what they are sort of most interested in trying to preserve is what they feel is their legal right to make their own rules. And they've argued over this in court in other legal cases as well, that they believe they have that right legally to do, and that's what they want to be able to preserve. They don't want judges making the rules for them. They don't want legislators making the rules for them. And in this instance, they really don't want legislators in a whole group of states making the rules, making different sets of rules for them, as opposed to having a national set of rules. I mean, I think if push really came to shove on this, the NCAA, couldn't get what it wanted in court and whatever else, I think they might turn to Congress, when there's a bill in Congress that would do the same thing that the California law will do. The bill was it was put in by a congressman from North Carolina, and it's with the Ways and Means Committee right now. Whether it'll go anywhere, who knows? But it's there, and that idea has been proposed outside of individual states.
Wow. Well, in your reporting on this, as it's began to unfold, and then of course when the governor of California signed it, what was the biggest arguments for it that you heard from people?
Well, and the arguments for it are pretty self-evident. It's just the idea that athletes, like any other student, ought to be allowed to make money off their name, image, and likeness. If a student who is not an athlete, who's a movie actor or an opera singer or an artist or whatever else, they have no restriction on what they can do, while being a student. It doesn't make them ineligible to be a student.
Yeah, and let me jump in there while your cell phone's ringing and you hit the button. So thank you. Like the first time I ever thought about this was when Shaquille O'Neal was at LSU, and I was the LSU basketball beat writer. Of course, he was here from 1989 to 1992. And during that time, I mean, Dale Brown actually brought it up, the coach. These people are walking around campus with the most popular piece of clothing that LSU produces, which is Shaquille jerseys and T-shirts with his name on it.
Right.
But he can't create that himself. He couldn't even, in theory, I guess now, an athlete at State U could buy up a whole bunch of T-shirts with his name on it, autograph them, and set up his own booth and sell them for $25 a pop. And people probably would line up like crazy and do it, and he'd make the money. Right,
which you can't do under the NCAA's rules right now. But a person who has, if you have sufficient fame that you could have your own YouTube channel that doesn't identify you as a college athlete with a particular school, you can do that under the NCAA's rules. The problem is that, obviously the athlete's fame is tied up in their athletic identity in most cases. I mean, there are people for whom that's not the case. And while a lot of the discussion around this is around football players and men's basketball players, this law would stand to help people like Katie Ledecky or Missy Franklin, who were, Olympic caliber swimmers who had, obvious name recognition and value that had nothing to do with them swimming for Cal and for Stanford, respectively. So there are athletes in sports outside of the mainstream revenue producing sports who could really benefit from this.
Wow, that's a great point. Okay, we got to take this break. We're going to come back with Steve Berkowitz from USA Today for a very short closing segment here on Sports 225. I'm Lee Feinswald. We'll be right back.
Can you imagine winning 50 times the cash from the lottery?
Imagine 50 times anything.
Throw pillows? Is the guy... He's there.
Multiply whatever. Play the new multiplier games from the lottery. Multiply your fun.
Break out of the chaos.
Hi, Joe Martin here, president of ITI Technical College, reminding you that classes start November 13th. So it's really important that you get in now and start your journey for a better life.
All right, coming down the home stretch of another Sports 225. Thanks for checking in. Go to sports225.com for all the show listings of when we're on Your View, Cox 4, and on CST. Steve Berkowitz at USA Today joining me. 18 states you can watch this show on, and it's kind of scary for those people. We've only got a couple minutes, but we talked about the positives of why people would want to do this. What is the biggest fear? And I assume bidding wars for athletes.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of fear around this. I mean, the most basic fear, aside from the NCAA losing its authority to make its own rules, again, a big legal contention in this has been that the notion of amateurism, as the NCAA chooses to define it, is an important differentiation between college sports and professional sports, and that if you don't have a distinction
to them, but not to people who really know what happens at the highest levels of football.
Well, right. I mean, yes, arguably. But so what the NCAA argues is that there needs to, in order to have fan interest, there needs to be a distinct product, essentially, and that what makes college sports distinct from pro sports is that the athletes aren't paid in the same way. To say the college athletes are not paid, everybody understands they're paid. I mean, there's the scholarships that they get and the benefits that they get. Whether or not it's a fair deal for certain athletes, that's a different conversation. But that's the distinction that they're trying to draw. Now, yeah, there's a lot of other fear about, whether or not you'll have what are essentially, boosters getting involved in a way that sort of takes it over the table as opposed to under the table. And you have guys, who are car dealers in local areas who go, well, geez, I want to be involved with the program, and this is a way to do it. That's a fear. There is, and I think there's also some question over time whether or not, if you have athletes able to make deals on their own, what sort of impact might this have on shoe and apparel contracts and these multimedia marketing rights deals that individual schools have that, derive a certain degree of their benefit from businesses locally who are buying sponsorships of the coach's show and the radio broadcasts and so on. And so, I mean, all of those things kind of roll into it as the possibility of problems. I mean, the other issue now is the imbalance, whether or not, if you have athletes in certain states or in California who can get this benefit and athletes other places who can't get the benefit, whether or not that becomes a recruiting advantage or disadvantage, depending on how the NCAA deals with those schools. I mean, that's another sort of fear out there.
Well, I could throw out so many different parts of this subject. I mean, like in my own case, Kirk Feinswag was on a full basketball scholarship in college, and it still cost me $7,000, $8,000 a year to help him get through and go to college. In Louisiana, and at LSU in particular, they've got a thing called TOPS, which is free tuition. So baseball, for example, might have a very unfair advantage, you could argue, against other states that don't have the same thing. But I'm not going there. I'm just going to thank Steve Berkowitz, my longtime friend from USA Today, for joining us. And Berko, always enjoyed it. When we finish, we'll continue this conversation off the air. Thanks for watching Sports 225.
At carnival time by Baton Rouge Bay, that's the site of my story. At Spanish Town Mardi Gras,